you for joining us on this May 1st as we kick off the Asian and Pacific Islanders Heritage Month. I want to thank especially the Chicago Monument Project for providing avenues for the collection of stories about the monuments in general. I think it takes a lot of courage to do that, to open the door. And I feel really good about the ability to share because I'm not alone and there's been people here for a long time. So we had been sharing this conversation even before this day, and it's really helped us to make sure that we're coming away, providing a lot of some of the answers anyways, that have been put forward that I'm hearing, and they're all important questions, and we have limited amount of time. So it has helped to give shape to our presentation today, and I want to thank everyone for sharing openly. This is the call that I answered to. This is what had gone out. And it made me think a little bit deeper about the 40 monuments that had been singled out on a different list that might be a little bit more troublesome than others. And I had found that the McKinley Statue was on that list. And instead of just looking to picking any statue out in the open, that was the main statue that had been speaking to me since I was very young. And clear into my career, it still kind of bothered me because I found myself having to do work in and around that area. And I never thought that anybody would understand why it would make me feel a little different. So I'm going to share from just the point of being born and raised in the Chicago area as a Native Hawaiian and trying to do what I can to remain who I am here abroad, surrounded by different ideas of who we are as a people, and by many who might not even know who we are. I want to thank the speakers who have agreed to join us. We're working on getting one more on board with us, and I hope to see her join us in a moment. We will have Kupuna Sissy Plekovic, who has been here for many years. She had also opened a business in that area years ago as well, and has, I think, 5 generations of ohana that she has been growing since her arrival here. And I think it's important that she kind of bring forward a little bit of her story. Hana E. Epstein is also with us, who is the newest member of the board of directors for the Aloha Center Chicago, who is hosting this. Mahalo for joining us. I'll let her share even more about what she does here. And then also a very dear friend that I've known for many years who has guided me through this entire path as I learn more and more about our Princess Kaiulani, Kaiulani Lum. So mahalo, you guys, for joining us. So I'm gonna just get to it. Because there's a lot of years that we're going to kind of squeeze in there. And the idea is to kind of identify a few of the Pacific Islanders who came to the Midwest, and there was impact on the future development of the Midwest, and so did the Native Hawaiian community. So we're going to begin with, at least as far back as 1874, having identified 2 key visitors to Chicago, and they both happen to be dignitaries of Hawaii. So the first would be King David Kalakaua. And although he came through at first in December of 1874, as it states here in the New York Times. He was sick and he had a traveling physician, and he had recommended not to come off the train and maybe to just postpone it on his westward way back. And he did, in fact, do that. And by the time he had done that, which was only January, the next month in 1875, there was sort of a theme hanging over that trip. And I think it's even evidence of the perceptions that were already in the Chicago area about who we were as a people, as Native Hawaiians. And in the quotes here, it's basically the fact that he survives. It's everywhere. He survives the second day of sightseeing in Chicago. He did get to visit the waterworks, the Board of Trade, the stockyards, but it was really sort of the side trip up to Milwaukee where he had a boisterous and noisy reception with Mayor Colvin. Once more succeeds in making an A of himself, and that lingers. Later we see that in a more abstract summary at the bottom, where it's still talked about his terrific oratorical crimes of Colvin. Makes me want to know what he looks like, but then I don't want to waste my time in that way. But you know, these two really spoke to the patience that our king had during that time. He must have, because he was also growing bored of some other parts of his trip. He returns back to Hawaii, and 9 months later, on October 16th, 1875, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the bells of Honolulu pealed for hours as they joyously announced the birth of Princess Victoria Kaiulani Kalani Nui Ahila Palapa Kavekiu I Luna Lilo Claghorn. Her mother, Princess Miriam Kekauluohi Like Like, was the king's youngest sister. Her father, Archibald Scott Cleghorn, was a Scottish-born merchant and one-time governor of Oahu. That was such a glorious point. The coming of a newborn ali'i to the people. It was glorious. Here's Kaiulani as an infant. She grew a little bit, and also as an adolescent. But it has always been for me this image of her, where she's so deep in thought, but she's so young. It almost weighs on me to look at her and wonder what it was that must have been weighing on her. What was her thoughts? And I also wonder if these kinds of characteristic in our young princess that might have spoken to the poet Robert Stevenson before she was sent away to prepare to learn and return and rule her kingdom. He wrote a poem for her called Island Rose. And it goes like this. Forth from her land to mine she goes, to island maid, the island rose, light of heart and bright of face, the daughter of a double race. Her islands here in southern sun shall mourn their iulani gone, and I, in her dear banyan shade, look vainly for my little maid. But our Scots islands far away shall glitter with unwonted day, and casts for once their tempest by, to smile in Kaiulani's eye. And I think of that poem often, that she represents so many of Native Hawaiians here in the Chicago area. That many of our children are hapa, they're half Hawaiian. She was half Hawaiian and half Scottish. Here's a depiction of the cover of the book from the Royal Diaries series, The People's Princess. And here she is sitting by her banyan tree, surrounded by her favorite peacocks. I always hear about the peacocks, except that I think they were all white. I don't think they were green. I thought I had read somewhere that she had many and that they really were white. In this book, she kind of shared a little bit of how she, let me move this, how she was thinking, how she was also comparing compared Chicago. San Francisco is like a small town, and Honolulu, a tiny village. The buildings are so tall it hurts her neck to look up at them. Our stop in the city lasted only a few hours, but we were able to go out and take a walk. Clement and Beatrice are happy because Mrs. Walker found a candy shop. She practically filled an entire satchel with her purchases. I think she tends to use the candy to bribe the children when they are unruly. The other passengers on the train will be relieved by this. It's funny because she's the age of a child herself, and she's thinking like that through the eyes of an adult, which is what she's been prepared to do. Disappointed that she couldn't stay, she still had to push off on her train on her way to New York City. After arriving abroad in 1990, this is a picture of a painting she painted for her father. And it came from a resource called Upoho Ukanui o Ke Kokia, which is Scotland's great Highland bagpipe. And there's a great connection here in the islands. And I had noticed in this source that a lot of the people that were referenced in this book are also referenced historically here, both in Chicago and especially to Milwaukee. It's very strong today. And here is also another piece of evidence of how important it is to make sure we acknowledge the other side of Kaiulani's heritage. This is an official Hawaii tartan that was inducted into the Caledonia Museum as well. And I was trying to actually purchase Hawaii tartan for our Hawaiian Civic Club. And I ended up finding it right here in the islands on Maui, because there is a shop there that caters towards bagpipes in Hawaii. So that was fun to be able to see that today, that side of her culture is very much alive. While she was abroad, she grew into a lovely young woman. There's not a whole lot of pictures of her with her glasses. So I thought I would put that in there. This is where I start to, this is the point where I start to feel a little uneasy every time I think of McKinley. This is 1893. This is an important year and a turning point that would forever affect the future of Native Hawaiians in our kingdom. Seen here with her appointed guardian traveling with her overseas is Mr. Theo Davies. So in 1893, January 17th, the Queen was deposed by rogue American businessmen and illegal support of the United States Marines and minister. The provisional government had seized all monarchy funds and ceded the lands, and basically leaving Kaiulani stranded with no money and no way to come home. It's in the year the princess returns to plead for the Hawaiian people at such a young age, her Hawaiian nation. It hits the newspapers. Rights demanded by defenseless girl, heir apparent was rudely neglected. It's there, but it's also stated Kaiulani makes it to America, which I find that to be just so amazing. At the age of 17, she had received no word. No one had shared with her what was taking place and what had happened. Mr. Davies did in the form of a cablegram, 5 words written islands transferred, princes provided for, which didn't happen that way, as we now know. And even when she arrives in New York City, she chooses to write her own speech and share to the people upon her arrival. I'm sorry for a very terrible read here, but I have it already posted on some of the other links for the Hawaiian Civic Club so that you can get a closer look at it. But she is recognizing how she had arrived to New York City without even the respect of being informed before her arrival, having expected what should have been a more regal reception in New York City was not. It was the opposite. And nearly, I think it states, I think 70, almost nearly a decade before the Christians had come, and they had developed a relationship and they began to trust America, and that 3 of those sons stood at Washington, D.C. at the Capitol asking to undo the work of their fathers. And I thought that was really important to me, that she would be able to articulate how she felt and maintaining such dignity, again, at such a young age. In March, she would carry that message down to Washington, D.C., where she would be left without a home or a name or a nation. She managed to speak with President Grover Cleveland and his wife. 7 days later, President Cleveland appoints A.C. Blount from Georgia to go to Hawaii and to report on the monarchy and determine if it should be retained. When he returned, President Cleveland indeed saw that there was an illegal overthrow based on some actions. And while he was president, he did attempt to restore the Queen to her throne. And he wrote, "By an act of war, committed with participation of diplomatic representation of the United States and without authority of Congress, the government of a feeble but friendly and confiding people has been overthrown." He would not be able to follow through on this during this term of presidency. He was faced with an election which he did not win, and in comes President McKinley. And instead of heeding to that act and trying to do right, on his watch, Lanialoha Lee was forced to abdicate her throne. And he still gears up to name Hawaii as a republic. This Blount's report is the foundation of current legislation being considered in the United States Senate, aimed at restoring recognition of the Hawaiian nation. So it's super important that this Blount report was recognized, but it didn't seem to be at all. The US troops invaded. The president wrote the words that it was an act of war. President McKinley comes in, he ignores those words, he ignores Queen Lanialoha Lee's protests, including the 21,000 signatures from Hawaiian citizens and residents. But when he couldn't legally obtain annexation through 2/3 vote in the Senate, McKinley pushes for a joint resolution, which is a domestic measure that I had learned required a simple majority. But what I had learned rather is that it had no power, it had no lawful authority beyond US borders. McKinley Statue, even today, an approach to today, I struggled to find anyone who really knew anything about him, regardless good or bad. If it was on the basis of supporting a group of people, or so some of the issues we all face with homelessness and food and the economic troubles that everybody continue to face. But instead, I'm finding more about him, not a whole lot, but someone had found this for me and had sent this, roadsideamerica.com. And it aligns with what I'm finding. Agreeing with age, President McKinley stands atop a pedestal, staring off into a park that bears his name, ready to give a speech to anyone who remembers him. That's exactly sort of what I have been met with. Sculptured by Mulligan and unveiled on the 4th of July in 1905. The statue almost didn't get made until the Chicago Parks Commission came up with the ingenious idea of melting down a statue of Christopher Columbus that nobody liked and turning it into a McKinley. My question would be is for why McKinley at that point, if there was some sort of significance to the timeline. And all the time that all of these actions were taking place from January of 1893, clear up to McKinley, and beyond to the election of McKinley, really the hubbub was 1893 World's Fair, of course, the Columbian Exposition. But not so much maybe for the other people that came aboard. The author Jane Desmond had shared some other insights about it. Staging tourism bodies on display from Waikiki to SeaWorld. And that it was no accident. The placement of the Hawaiian dancers was not accidental. Various populations on display were mapped according to a racial hierarchy of civilized to savage. The Germans and Irish were closer to the white city of the main grounds of the exposition, and the furthest sites occupied by those considered least civilized. Africans and Native Americans, as the Chicago Tribune put it. What an opportunity was here afforded to the scientific mind to descend the spiral of evolution, tracing humanity in its highest phases down almost to its animalistic origins. So-called brown people were placed in the middle of the plaisance where the Hawaiians were. Such groups were presented as primitive, perhaps, but charming and ultimately civilizable, precisely the evaluation necessary for annexation. So again, just everywhere, the perceptions of how they regarded us just did not do us justice. If you look at the bottom, plaisance, underneath the C and E, you see how we're tucked away, South Sea Islands, right next to the Samoans, and across from Java, which was quite large. I don't know, I guess when I look at this, it looks pretty much packed in that way. If the number of thousands of people who had came through, I don't know, I think I would feel a little uncomfortable. Jenny Wilson, who was one of the people among the delegation, a former court dancer of King David Kalakaua, was interviewed many years later in 1961, sharp as a whip. This is, I found on NPR. And she recalls as well, the midway was packed with people and Wilson stood on a table to do a ballyhoo, the verbal advertisement for the show, singing where the naughty girls from hula do the naughty hula dance. On the midway plays dance. She sort of said that in a playful, rhythmic tune. One had to do something like that to attract a crowd, she recalled. After a crowd had gathered, she ran inside to dance, after which the crowd was ushered out the back, and the whole sequence began again with a fresh crop of viewers. If the dancers hadn't succeeded in attracting viewers, she said, the act would have been canceled. Photographs of the hula dancers in the local papers helped ensure their popularity, as perhaps did the details of her performance style. Wilson recalls what the actual hulas they performed were in the old style, but they pepped it up a little sometimes, and she played to the most elderly men in the audience, making eye contact and winking. Here's an image of the White City's repurposed water tower, in which this took place. I have yet to find images on the inside of this, which I would love to see. But I can already, immediately I see that they're only willing to attach a little bit to the front part of this repurposed water tower to make at least their entrance a little bit more gallant feeling. That was my sense. Civilizable, precisely the evaluation necessary for annexation. I still found those words a little bit hard, but maybe too civilized. They look pretty normal, and at least from a few of the sources, I could only get a fix of the back of them and only know that they're from the islands just because of how it's titled here, but you do see other cultures standing in front of them. And you see here that the other images of representation that was there for the South Sea Islanders were just kind of all slammed into the same picture. They weren't designated. I would love to know if the young woman on the right might have been Jenny Wilson at that time. It seems like, by a guess of the age, it would. But this is more of what they were seeking, was to really parade the South Sea Islanders. And you could see how that attracted far more people. I guess in 1905, when I hear that year, this to me is more closer to monument. So the Chicago Field Museum would inadvertently acquire the Ruatepupuke II, as we know it today. Back in 1905, they had a collector abroad, and he came across this artifact that was sitting in a German museum, was for sale. He sent a cablegram back to the United States to ask for sanction to purchase it. I think things got tight. Another buyer came into play. He made the executive decision to go ahead and purchase it for $5,000 before a cablegram actually came back that said not to purchase it. But I'm so glad that they did. This is where the kind of state in which it was being presented. That's a backdrop. That's a mannequin dressed up. I'm not even sure what the other mannequin to the right is. But today, if we could still see this come back to life because somebody cares for this and alive and well, then this is that moment where it all pays off. This to me is the monument. And if this can still be, if it's available today, and it is now, Chicago's Marae, if it can permit stakeholders of the Maori community who's attached to this monument in particular, from Aotearoa, which is in this case 2016, the All Blacks team, and members, stakeholders who reside here in Chicago's Midwest, the Paddy Te Tai and his family, and as well as the continent US, representing the West Coast, being able to join back at this place to reconnect with people, even though their stakeholders, their family members who reside here have passed away. This is the nephew of one of the mentors here in the city of Chicago, Thomas Kini, who actually knew and traveled the world with Paddy Te Tai. And for the first time, he had seen him since he had left. These are moments to cherish. If the families from Tokomaru Bay, which is the place in which Ruatepupuke hails from, can make it up here, makes a point to come every 10 years to check in, make sure everything's okay. And though it sits with the Field Museum, that the Field Museum is taking proper care. Then that is monumental. And especially of today, that we can bring even other cultures from the Midwest, like Arkansas here, joined with Native Americans and board of directors for the Aloha Center. This is monumental. And not everybody in this image are Polynesians. It will always take a little bit of help with those Hawaiians at heart and everybody else in that field who have continued to support and bring that forward. I can't help but tip my hat off to Dr. John Terrell and all of the people that have passed through those halls that would learn to understand and experience these things. It's fantastic. If you haven't, this actually is the newest exhibit coming away from the 2020, the Marquichin exhibit. So I invite you to do that. So now I'm going to jump into the idea that we're in the post-1900s and how it continued to grow after the influence of the World's Fair. Joseph K. Kuku, who is the inventor of the Hawaiian steel guitar and the resource of the Hawaiian steel guitar and its great Hawaiian musicians, taught Hawaiian steel guitar at 431 South Wabash at the Langdon Brothers Hawaiian Guitar School. Late 30s, and there's a name, Hawaiian Guitar School. That's amazing to me. And though it didn't take many years, well, today the residents of 431 South Wabash happens to be Roosevelt University, but it didn't take much long after that until we started to see the birth of Hawaiian Steel Guitar Association in Joliet. That was another point of evidence that the whole thing about tourism and Hawaii and those sounds and characteristics of music that puts them back there, like the Hawaiian steel guitar, really touched so many people that they began to now begin these organizations. Now, the two that started the Hawaiian Steel Guitar Association were not Hawaiian. They were simply from Joliet. That's where they live, and so that's why it's based there. But they have brought many local Hawaiian artists to the Chicago Midwest area. And a couple decades later, yet another spin-off Hawaiian Steel Guitar Association came to be and is based in Indiana. Not all of the Hawaiians were incoming. We had Hawaiians from the Chicago Midwest that were here, began their path here, and then moved to the islands to make some great contributions. And this is a perfect example. Herb Kane, born in 1928, was half Hawaiian and half German. It was born in the Lake Wobegon country and our north neighbors to Wisconsin area. And he would grow to become known just a visionary painter of traditions in Hawaii. And given that he was born and raised here, it was amazing. Even voyagers marvel at his vision and that he's able to really depict that in his work. Graphic artist. He actually went to school here in Chicago in 1953. He acquired his master's degree from Art Institute of Chicago and University of Chicago. But before returning home to YPO, which is where his father was from, he and a colleague had opened up a graphic arts studio downtown Chicago, but at the end of the day, really preferred to get away. This is a little sketch of his cottage north along the shore. Glencoe. By this time, as we approach the 50s, the Midwest was riddled with publication companies. It wasn't just New York to LA, but not just Chicago either. Ohio, Indiana, it was everywhere. And then you could see then Criterion became known for creating a series of songbooks that was geared for ukulele, I think was the intention, but I could see by the tunings and the keys, they were really leaning towards bridging towards the most of the people being able to play guitars. That was one of the characteristics of this. Wasn't always in the C tuning that we use today, many of us use today. On the cover of this volume, book number 2 happens to be Roti Tahori, and the Tahori family was a huge Tahitian family that came to the Midwest in and around this time, actually, and ended up, the first one I think would be Marata Tahori, which she got her first apartment in Edgewater. So when the other Tahitians came in, they sort of gravitated there to that side. As it happens, her husband, Pat Silva, who is Hawaiian, was an original member of the group The Surfers. This is an album cover of a track called Shells that was very popular. I don't know a single group who did not put this to stage here in the entertainment industry, the Chicago area. They performed often in Chicago in the early 50s, so much so that when they recorded an LP called Tahiti, it became an all request album from the Stardust and Flamingo in Las Vegas, and then also including the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And I kid you not, I stumbled across this album while I was on Kauai Island, having just visited Anahola, where my grandmother is from, and Kapa'a, still horses all around. There was this little used record and vinyl store, and I made myself comfortable, start pulling out stuff. And the first thing I saw was a picture of my uncle in this album. But I was shocked because I'd never seen that album, was unaware of it. And here I am in the middle of Kapa'a looking at Chicago's Edgewater Beach Hotel on this album. This is the signature Erickson poster of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And what was really interesting is this is the hotel that many actors and politicians just from all over the world had come to visit. You see that there's a helicopter in the air. They had a helipad on the top of this airport. They had an antenna because they also had their own radio station, and Lakeshore Drive ended at the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and that beach belonged to them. They would also often fly their most prestigious guests at the hotel to the city of Chicago. It was a main way of transporting them. And this is later on, that used to be called a marine dining room. And I heard more about this and even ran across of some people who still live in Edgewater, who was a young boy taking photography gigs up in this room. And he remembered that when it reopened as the Polynesian Room, he was just so in awe at what it was portraying. He just never wanted to leave. He felt that he was already in the islands. So, that was the closest thing to Hawaii, was really in these rooms. And we would begin to see more venues develop, trying to match that. I still tried to listen to see if I can't find recordings of the group on radio. I would just be delighted to be able to lay ears on that. And this is an image of the Edgewater Hotel during the time that mid-50s, over the span of 3 years, Lakeshore Drive would extend, and that would be the beginning of the end for the Edgewater Hotel. By the late 50s, we began to see key Native Hawaiians migrate to Chicago's north side mainly, but everybody drifted even from that point and spread out. Caroline Namahoe Ke'ikoa had been contracted for an extended performance at the infamous Shanghai Lil's restaurant in Chicago, which was the place. When the Edgewater was closed, it seems like the Shanghai Lil's was the next best place. And it was up there at Foster and Milwaukee on the very far north side of Chicago. And here was sort of the pose a lot of people on the day used to take if they were in hula. So we needed that shot, the hula hands. Right side by side with her is Sam Ka'a'a, who's actually a renowned Hawaiian steel guitar artist who is in the same resource as Joseph K. Kuku. But by then, the 60s, coming upon the 60s, it wasn't enough to be able to just do what you do. If what you did was dance and that's all you did, it wasn't enough, because the audiences and the clients became more demanding of this model that they had in their head. So you can see here how, matching white was the thing, slacks and lei. And this is beautiful, still beautiful to me. But you don't see him on his main instrument. He learned to be adaptable. Hawaiians were just fantastic artists. So here he is with an upright bass. And here in this image, both of them are in their role of secondary. So even though Caroline danced hula, she would sing that part of the highly demanding Hawaiian wedding song. And these were the two power duos. And here's Sam not with any instrument, and he had to sing that other counter part. But then you see the vibes in the back. So you can also see that during that time, even the groups and the performers were beginning to reach back to recreate that, say, a more exotic sound. We have Arthur Lyman in Hawaii to thank for that, and he was a great model for me. I later became a mallet player because of him. And then if, all of a sudden the requests for performances to leave these venues started to grow. But again, he didn't always have that guitar player. So he would just fill the gap and pick up that jazz sort of feeling in his music arrangements. Kau'ulu, Bill Sharman, he was the first to bring hula to Chicago's Midwest. He comes via military, was a stenotypist in the courts for the Air Force. And when he came, he could see that there was no capacity. So the hula that he taught would be attached to some of our renowned vocalists like Angie Genoa Keawe and her LP series. And everybody here owned those albums. But also the Hapa Haole songs as well, because that was so strong during that time. And a lot of people were still coming back and forth, stationed here and stationed over there. So he was known for bringing Hapa Haole here first. And then also Hinano would arrive via Air Force as well, but she received her computer training in the Air Force and ended up at the Chanute-Rantoul Air Force Base downstate Illinois, and had decided to choose Chicago to grow her family. She wasn't really on the entertainment side, though she had a lovely voice, but she could manage. She really liked the backside, and our group started called Na'ohana. And back then, during this time, Aloha Airlines and Hawaiian Airlines both had Chicago-based offices. So we became a part of the promotional team here, which would help with bridging that time frame of people coming over back and forth, and of course, saving a little bit as well. And I think I want to also say that Hawaii Visitors Bureau also came and had an office in Chicago. I'm not quite sure when they arrived. I suspect it was together with the airlines, but I know that it closed in 1995. And Kalihiki, he was the first to bring ancient hula. This was that other kind of chanting style that was not sought after, wasn't what was requested when people asked for performances for their own personal engagements. Not sure that that was what they were looking for, but he certainly introduced it in a way that you could feel very comfortable behind it. He was bringing the chanting styles and accompanied with all of the proper traditional implements, and it was always the hula that spoke to what he would be using. And that was a really huge changing point, especially for those who were actively performing in the area. He returned home to Hawaii the same way he got here. He comes to Chicago via the hospitality industry, and United Airlines is still here as an open gateway. We are often seeing plenty Hawaiians coming to Chicago, and some never left. Some are still here and are growing families. I've witnessed it. I see them. They're still here. Coming towards the end part of the 60s, tourism was still very strong. And here's Don Ho bringing the infamous tiny bubbles to the Palmer House. And one of the things I remember reading in his one of his published books that talked about his travels during his performances is that he had to share with his cast members to not step outside the hotel because of the protests that took place out there on the streets. And still, the next year, it didn't stop the groups coming in. They really were vying for more of that Hawaii feeling here in the area. 1967, we're seeing evidence of Hollywood, hula being introduced to Hollywood, and some of the key families like the Beamer family that was brought to Hollywood to share. Mahi Beamer and Charles K. Davis were a part of these productions that were running in Vegas. That's usually where they ended up. Nalani Kale's Polynesian Review, and here is Chicago's very own magazine Wear cover. And you can see the model here, how it is so pristine in this way. And it's very hard to achieve that here after so many years, and you don't have the same kind of excellence and natural skill sets to be able to share in their culture with the audience. When they touch with the audience, it's because they're really dancing from the heart. That is very difficult to duplicate. And people who are from the islands know the difference. We strive though, because look at what they do. They encourage us. So we keep on, and I think we continue to try. We also have Hawaiians at heart that started here in the Midwest and would go back to the islands and make great contributions. Here's New York Times. Man from Minnesota teaches Hawaiians a thing or two about their own language. To the state of Minnesota, this man is known as Marvin Nogelmeier, but to Hawaii, he is known as Puakea Nogelmeier, right here from Minnesota. And today he's fluent speaking. He is an avid mo'olelo storyteller of Hawaiian folklore and myths and legends, and a researcher and activist, and constantly contributing to the Native Hawaiian community. We could not be so delighted. And for all the people that have gone home to Hawaii, you have heard this man's voice. He is the voice, the wiki bus that you hear all the time. And in the airports, I hear him everywhere, and has even ever since then become quite the prolific songwriter, the lyricism that he has and he puts forward. It's just really, really beautiful. And that really helps the Midwest, I think, in the means of you don't have to be Hawaiian. You just have to understand and perpetuate the culture the way it was delivered. And of course, I have to put this in here, but really, I remember having a conversation about when he was the senator here, and of course, Hyde Park had just embraced him, and I'm listening to them, kind of sharing, that's our guy. Barack Obama belongs to Hyde Park, and I thought, he graduated from Puna High School in Hawaii, and it's, I think his handprint is in the sidewalk. You can't deny that. So I know I go back home and I'm hearing Hawaii say, no, Obama is Hawaii's guy. He belongs to Hawaii. But it was this dear friend of mine who reminded me that he still had another part of the world through his father, and that they also claim him. But really, what she was telling me is he is really the world. He belongs to the world. He was the people's president, all peoples. That is really heaven to me. Here's a point where we begin. Office of Hawaiian Affairs comes to the Chicago area for no other reason but to meet the Native Hawaiians for the first time here in Chicago, to tell stories, to hear theirs, let them share how they came to be. And it took place here at the Japanese American Service Committee. This was really in this snapshot, this really in the moment, I did see that one day we would see the birth of the Hawaiian Civic Club. Come on, I'm going to ask my kids to come forward, because at the end of this, historic moment, here we are gathered. There are so many connections in this picture alone, many of which today have passed. But we were joined together by a single chant that could be shared with all people. And, my kids are up here. Here's my son, here's my daughter, here's my niece, and here's another one. And they're all like third generation. But even then today, these two kids I'm gonna have join me in just giving you an example of how proud we still are today. Eo e na o I violino ea, na pula pula a haloa ea, mai Hawaii ia ni I hauea, puni ke ao mana ea e. Ku e a we ka have a ku a we ka pono ku e a we ka have a ku a we ka pono ku, he melino na o I violino, ku. Today, we still chant this, and we still teach this, and we still share about the moment in which we received it. Because of the moment, which always comes first, the event comes first. It seals all of the learning and the connecting to tradition. We'll never have to put paper down. And that is the essence of oral tradition. But we don't have enough opportunities and platforms in which to practice that. October 16th, 2005, on our beloved Princess Kaiulani's anniversary birthday, Native Hawaiians, charter members of the Keali'i Victoria Kaiulani Hawaiian Civic Club, we gathered in Lincoln Square for the reading of the Constitution and bylaws. And that took 2 years of making sure we were thinking about it, throwing it around, making sure that our kupuno is ready to move forward, because the mana'o behind us coming together is that this club would be guided by the wisdom of our elders and not the other way around. It gave us plenty to think of. This was a historic moment. Later that month, we received our charter, October 28th, in Kona, Hawaii. The next year, the first thing we were so proud to do was to join the Mainland Council and members of the Association of Hawaiian Civic Clubs at the Capitol in DC for the lei draping of King Kamehameha statue that takes place each June. Here we are pictured in that place where King Kamehameha was tucked behind a post you couldn't see, in the corner, and nearly impossible to access when we have so many people every year coming for the lei draping. But I was really grateful to have learned that what Hawaiian civic entities can do for us is it can help us be heard. Maka'aina and the Hawaiian Civic Club from Washington, D.C. lobbied to have the king placed in simply a more respectful and dignified place. And now he stands under sunlight. We take great care in where our statues are and how they're being treated, and if they can be in a state of natural light. That matters to us. After the passing, just months after our trip to Capitol, still in 2012, picking things up, moving it forward, addressing issues most sensitive to Native Hawaiians up here, like health disparities and Native Hawaiians incarceration. The numbers are just as drastic as any other ethnic community in Hawaii and here. And I can't help but think about those spread throughout the continent where there are even less Native Hawaiians who can come and help them. These things were important. In 2015, I made the decision that I think we needed to focus on Chicago and tried to move this forward. So the Aloha Center Chicago became a way that we can create a home for all. One of the first things we did, I believe, was the fall of 2016 into 2017, was work with members of the Native American community. And soon after, a resolution was presented to the City Council with a unanimous vote by all 50 members. And we had the Indigenous Peoples Day as an alternative to the Columbus Day celebration. And I think that action was also important. These are alternative ways, but also stepping stones of getting to the point in which the big ultimate Amazon, Google goals are, but there's still the idea that we still have to be patient and take these steps. And I was glad to have learned a great deal from that experience working with the Native American community. Very delighted that in the moment of the calling, here in 2018, top of August, a Jewish businessman opens up a store and decides to copyright and then send letters to all Hawaiians around the world and any business that had the word aloha in it. And then he's making money off of poke, which is something we all grew up with, but yet the way they treat that fish and how they serve it is not, and the ridiculous price for it. But we had to take steps. The Native Hawaiians here in the city would not have accomplished our stepping out without the help of the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and how they pulled together. And we see Mehona here, who's outreach, and Kumuhula Vicky Holt Takamine, who is master in hula, but also an activist, which was super important. And also the Council for Native Hawaiians in Advancement with Kuhio Lewis and all of the help from his staff. And even in this pictures, Hawaiians, I'm sorry, Hawaiian from the islands, Hawaiian from along the northwest coast area, Native American, hula community, all in this picture. I think the Native Hawaiian community is often misconstrued by Koko, by its blood. It's small, but by support, we're big. So it's hard for me to speak and not be inclusive of everybody, which is why I try to be here. Here we are downtown on Madison. And the thing about this gentleman on the right holding the sign is his connection to Chicago. He is from Hawaii, and he is a member of a Hawaii-based Hawaiian Civic Club, but his son is disabled, and he is here. So he supports our civic club as well, and he is in transit. That story is very, very common. History of the city of Chicago, the first Native Hawaiian-led march protest. And it was difficult internally for me because the two people holding that flag, the same two people who just chanted, are Hawaiian Jewish. And they were confused. And they have grown being able to chant in Hawaiian and chant in Hebrew. But the questions they had is, why didn't he just start a business, call it Shalom, and put gefilte fish on lettuce and do it that way? But that is that sense of business. It's just their ability to, it's their right to just make a living off of selling something. They don't have to have a connection or own it. But that was very difficult. And mind you, less than 5 days after this march, my daughter was heading to University of Hawaii Hilo and was scared to death about how she would be received because of her surname. Everything was good upon her arrival. There were people yelling at her from across the campus who saw her and recognized her on Hawaii News Now in the islands. And they saw that she was supporting, doing her thing. So she was very relieved, but this was carried to the islands. It was very difficult. And here's her heart. We still malama our officers. And at the end, when we broke, I was delighted that still she was moved. This is such my grandmother. In the way that she made sure she just checked in with everybody. 1 year, almost to the anniversary, the TMT, the 30-meter telescopes sitting on sacred lands. Our Mona is here on Foster Beach. Even if the city doesn't know it, we do. This was along the same beach in which all Hinano, Caroline, all of the first Hawaiians coming to the north side, even the Tahitians were all playing softball on the lake and the leaves. This is home. This was home. So we met. And then later in the same day, we were at the Aloha Center and we joined OEV TV on a satellite live recording, chanting and singing alongside everyone that was on the Mauna Kea. And here in this is still Native Hawaiians, Native Americans, people who are Hawaiians at heart that traveled down from Iowa, from Wisconsin. And in the back left corner, we have a few of the science members from the science community at the Adler Planetarium, who were courageous and so awesome, having put their names to the list, that as scientists, they feel that there is a way. We can't be desecrating other lands, that there is another way. We were grateful to have them both at the beach, Foster Beach, and here. And then 2020, a year after that, October 16th, on Kaiulani's birthday, we met. Not because it was ahead of me, but because of all the protests with all the other statues, it was literally being placed upon me. And there things. We were trying to survive. Also, the COVID and the Aloha Center. Still, I think what we wanted to do is do it the way the princess would have, to educate the people. So we called to just talk story. And we didn't come empty-handed. We brought food. We catered that. And it was donated by the Asian Outpost Hawaiian Hideout. That's along that far south, but just at the other end of Roosevelt. And when we were done with that and we shared, that food went to the homeless over there who we invited to come. We needed to see and meet the people there. And we wanted them to see and meet us here. We even approached some of the cars that were clearly sent to watch out for us, but we were nothing like the other people. 2 weeks before we met here, I did speak with a Native Hawaiian here in the area, born and raised here, who is currently a police officer for Chicago's police department. And unfortunately, he was able to share with me that there are a bunch of road groups out there who are just trying to make troubles. But that's not in any step on our path had we ever gone in that direction. And I'm so glad, because we really still need to respect our princess. So following that, we had been met with, in the past week or so, a lot of questions, all pertinent. And we thought that we'd try to answer some of the bottom line questions. Why McKinley? That was the call that we answered to. Of all the statues, we chose that one. So why McKinley? On July 6th, 1898, McKinley committed fraud to continue the occupation of the Hawaiian Islands, simply by signing a joint resolution of Congress. It was called Newlands Resolution, that purported the annexation of Hawaii. The Newlands Resolution illegitimately claimed United States annexation of the Hawaiian Islands, even though such document does not have any power. I'm learning as I go to. Legitimacy to annex an internationally recognized nation, okay, with official treaties in 18 foreign states dating as far back as 1846. That's heavy. Why McKinley? Princess Kaiulani was heir apparent to the throne prior to the illegal overthrow. In 1993, Congress passes the Apology Resolution. The then President Clinton would sign that, whereas on April 30th, 1900, President McKinley signed the Organic Act that provided a government for the territory of Hawaii, defined the political structure and powers of the newly established territorial government and its relationship to the United States. And that they apologize. Quote, apologizes to Native Hawaiians on behalf of the people of the United States for the overthrow of the Kingdom of Hawaii on January 17th, 1893, with participation of agents and citizens of the United States, and the deprivation of the rights of Native Hawaiians to self-determination. That's really good reason. But then we were asked why the princess. I guess fair enough as well, because that's who, of course, we're proposing. But hopefully you see now that there is a distinct connection and why it would have only been Princess Kaiulani that we would have proposed. Hawaii and Chicago have a long-standing economic and cultural relationship dating back over a century, yet no statue that honors Hawaii's treasure stands here. She was a significant international figure. People knew her from all over the world and immortalized by the poet Robert Louis Stevenson. Don't forget all the films and the educational curricula, the Smithsonian and Chicago Daily Tribune. She was subject to constant surveillance by global press in Hawaii, on the continental US continent, and across Europe. Quote, as a royal woman in the late 19th century. Wow. National Endowment for the Humanities. Quote, Kaiulani was known around the world for her intelligence and attractiveness. Humanities, fall of 2019. COVID fall of 2019, that recent. And her historic Chicago visit in 1899, of course, preceded by the infamous Hawaii exhibition at Chicago's Columbian World's Fair in 1893. The same fair that made way for Leif Erikson's statue to be erected by request of members of Chicago's Norwegian community. And unlike at least 10 of the statues in Chicago's parks, whose namesakes never set foot in Chicago, Kaiulani purposefully traveled to Chicago from Hawaii to witness its impressive sights. While Kaiulani fought for the rights and freedom of the people, McKinley is widely seen as racist and advancing white supremacy and pushing indigenous people out of their lands across America and into the Pacific and beyond. His statue perpetuates a grave wrong. Hence my opening sentence in my submission to be selected, which I'm so grateful for. The McKinley statue is a constant reminder of the illegal overthrow of our queen. And had that not happened, Princess Kaiulani today would be ruling Hawaii. Here's a little bit of our rendering. Princess Kaiulani is a model of elegance, intelligence, moral courage, and a defender of justice at a very young age, whose presence will touch young and old. I foresee the people's princess because of her double race as well, and everyone else who has the same struggles. Remembering the historic origin of the park could be a way we begin to change that dialogue, as it was once a horse stable. Sitting under her banyan tree, swimming, and horseback riding were favorite pastimes of Princess Kaiulani. And that's my story. Let me see if I can. Okay. Wait. Did I turn that off correctly?
Yes.
I did?
Yes.
Okay. Hannah?
Aloha.
Aloha. Oh, did we lose Keha?
No,
Okay.
we have Keha on. Nobody's on video or mic yet, but you just let us
Okay.
know whenever.
Well, I figure if Cecilia, remember I have to tell you two apart, right? So Auntie Sissy Pluckavick and Auntie Cecilia board of director. I figure you can begin to maybe share if there was any questions or begin with thoughts as well, which I welcome if you want to share something and then connect. Auntie?
Oh, you're talking to me?
Yeah.
Well,
I know there are two sissies.
So right now, really so the comments have been, thank you for a beautiful presentation. Thank you for the history. So those are the comments. Any questions from the audience that they would like to ask Lonnie? And Lonnie, do you want the other panelists also to, do you want to open this up to everybody then to answer questions, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi,
Okay, so-
Auntie Sissy joins us, I see. Hi, Auntie.
So yeah, so any questions, please enter it in the chat and I'll be happy to relay it to
Right.
present.
While Auntie Sissy's trying to find her volume, I think that's what she's trying to do. Oh,
appearing on the screen. I had to delete that. Okay.
hi, Auntie.
Hi,
So-
Lani. How are you? It's a nice presentation you did. Interesting.
Thank you. I had plenty help. It is not all me. Just want to make sure that's clear. But hi, Uncle. That is so good to see everybody. You know,
Lonnie, I
maybe,
do have a question. There's a question that was just posted, so I'll ask it of everyone on the panel. How can we support this going through?
How could you support?
Yeah, going through to move forward, I guess. So, yeah.
I can't answer that because there's so many
Gotcha.
things going on.
sure. I'll take a stab at that, and maybe Hannah can chime in. I don't see K-How, but I think probably she has ears. You know, we are learning as we're going. A year ago, I would have never thought that we would make it this far. But just to kind of retrace quickly so that we can maybe think about how this would move forward is the first step was meeting at the foot of the McKinley Statue. And it was really for the only purpose of sharing Kaiulani's story and just educating and re-educating. And my come away and my hopes from that night was, it's okay if there wasn't a whole lot, but I was really delighted that we still got quite a few people who I think all cared to want to know. That is better to me than having an awful lot of people who aren't listening, who might not be there for the right reason. So I would do that there and come away, and I would just be quiet and see what happens. I did not realize that we would be heard and that it started to travel a little bit. And I was getting hits even from Hawaii, you know, supporting this effort. And it got to the point where I needed to establish a Facebook page because I didn't know how to separate this dialogue. It was so brand new. So then I'm utilizing that as a tool. And then a dear friend of mine who works with the city, and we've worked together as colleagues for decades, a couple decades at the very least, who had shared with me that there is this new committee that was being put together, appointed by the mayor, and that it was focusing on the statues. And that there were now avenues in which we can maybe get the story out. And so I saw the application for submission, simple online. And I just took a shot and I put it out there. And I had admitted to one of the members that reached out to us in the end that I hit that enter button not really thinking we would be selected. I was not really in belief that the city of Chicago was yet ready to hear this. And then I get the call, or the email that we were selected with not enough time. I should have thought more about that date, but it launched May, and so be it. We are here. And now we are here. So here's the next stage that I can officially deliver this in its entirety. And now people can get the full picture, because it's not an easy task, first of all, to lay that out and to identify the people and to show the impact to the community. But what I'm delighted is, especially even the evidence here in our registrations for this event, there are at least half of registrants, Hawaiian names I have not seen before. That is also a blessing. That is showing that our community is growing beyond the entertainment, right? Beyond these other mechanisms that have been there, but mainly for entertainment, not really to support who we are as a people or any of the civic engagements that are taking place.
How are we going to make this work?
So maybe we open this discussion, which is why I really love this platform, to open that discussion. So I think here's here's maybe a way to get to that answer. I have thoughts, but maybe if I could turn this to Hana. And Hana, you introduce yourself and share your stance about the statue. And then I think you'll find that there's a place that we can take this to the next step. And I do think it will involve the help and willingness of, say, the Chicago Park District being able to work with us. If we can't come to terms about this statue, certainly, you know, there's other land out there, and perhaps there's another place. But first, I'd like for this discussion to prove to me that McKinley Statue now is not the place. And I have some thoughts about where that can go. But before I do that, I think it's important we hear Hana. So I'm going to defer again. Sorry about that, whoever that was who answered the question, but we will get to that. Ask the question, we'll get to that. Hana, would you please kind of share a little bit about your thoughts at this point?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna share a little bit about my journey to Chicago and what I do here now. So I am Hana E. Epstein. I am a board member at Aloha Center Chicago and Nothing Without a Company, a resident playwright of the Chicago Dramatists, founder of Bearcat Productions, and a member of the Keali'i Victoria Kaiulani Hawaiian Civic Club and Ke Kula Kupa'a o Ka Pika Pakipika Halau. I am a warrior of words. I create works of art and aid in the development of new work, which is constructed to open up conversations in industries where diversity, inclusion, and equality are lacking. My creative work focuses on telling the hard stories Native Hawaiians have faced. Some have not survived, and some have. I am Kanaka Maoli, Native Hawaiian, originally from Waialua and Haleiwa towns on Oahu, and I migrated to Chicago in 2004. During my first 14 years in Chicago, I would visit the Ruatepupuke at the Field Museum to find a sense of home. However, the museum, like all businesses, has operating hours, and I was not always able to visit when they were open. So I began to steer my work toward telling stories of Native Hawaiians and AAPI folks. I figured since I missed the homeland, I would write about it. My award-winning play, Not One Batu, had its world premiere at Kumukahua Theater in 2016. I decided to bring this play to Chicago to have its continental premiere in 2018 through Nothing Without a Company. This is when I first met the folks at Aloha Center Chicago and found my people who perpetuate the Aloha spirit. And I needed to be a part of that. I needed that to be a part of the play, because education through entertainment, yeah. And I never considered myself an activist. I began to accept that I was a Hawaiian living in the Midwest. That's activism. My very existence in the continent is activism. I am here, I am Hawaiian. My creative work is activism as it fights against the stereotypes of what being Hawaiian is, of what folks in Hawaii must deal with on a realistic level. We are not grass skirts and cold poke on hot rice. We are not a postcard to send to your family. We are not savages. We are not your misperceptions. We are educated. We are innovative. We are a proud and complex people, and we are warriors. I and many other Native Hawaiians do not have a place in the Midwest that we can visit to feel closer to our homeland, to feel closer to each other, to chant, to create works of art, to just be. And this statue could be that for us. Uamau ke ia oka aina ika pono. The life of the land is perpetuated in righteousness. I am asking Chicago to do the righteous thing, to erect a statue of our beloved Princess Kaiulani in the place of the McKinley Statue, so the lives of Native Hawaiians and Hawaiians at heart can be perpetuated on the land of Chicago. Ua mau ke ia aina o ka pono. Mahalo.
Right on. And
Good. Yeah.
you know that it speaks to my first inkling that a way to maybe see justice served in a different kind of way was to maybe, since McKinley Statue was already repurposed once, perhaps to consider repurposing it again and erecting it into what would become Princess Kaiulani. So that's the first thing I thought about moving forward. And the logistics of accomplishing that, I realized it is very close to people, and it's an undertaking that would take a very long time. But then other people had other suggestions, which I guess it could take into play. The main thing is, you know, I don't even like to drive on Western Avenue if I have to pass 37th Street and look at that statue. And I think that what's missing here is that others need to know what that's about. So if we can't erect her, there was a suggestion out there, well, then let's make the McKinley Statue. Let's find a better place for her in exchange for still, educating the people. Let's put McKinley Statue on the audio tour. Let's share that story about how we view him and what his actions were during his time as president. And let's take that plaque off and let's put truth on that plaque. So when people come by, they're going to hear it, they could see it. There's all different ways nowadays that it's very interactive. And I would like to see that, but not just interactive, the ability to be able to look to Princess Kaiulani Statue in the way that Hana had just described, that she is out there for everybody and anybody when you need her to be there for you. That's really what I think, really need. And by erecting her statue, that makes that sacred ground for us.
That's a good point. I have grandkids that I'd like to show that they have intermixed with the Hawaiian, with all the Hawaiians together. And statue is one of the significant for them. They have their Hawaiian blood, although
they could identify with.
They could identify themselves. I have like 13 great-grandchildren, 22 grandchildren. Oh, I want them, and they're here,
And they're all proud to be Hawaiian.
and they're all proud of their Hawaiians. And I'm proud of them that they don't mention any other nationality. It's their Hawaiian. Anytime somebody asks them, what are you, what you call it? What's it called it? Your nationality. Yeah, nationality. And it's, I'm Hawaiian. Although their father could be white or different race, but they're Hawaiian. They're more Hawaiian. So my so strong with them. My Hawaiian is them. And when I'm from the Big Island, I was born and raised in Kona. I moved to Honoka, where Waipio is right around the corner there. And whenever we go home, that's where we head.
Nobody spoke Hawaiian.
And I used to speak Hawaiian when I was in grade school. I can't speak English. My teacher, fortunately, she was Hawaiian. So she, even when I had to go to the bathroom, I had to ask her in Hawaiian how to get there. And it takes me a while to come around to speak English, And now I forget about the Hawaiians. I can't, I understand, but I can't speak the language anymore. Isn't that a shame? So I'm glad you started this. It's very interesting. I love it.
So Lonnie, can I, there are a couple of questions here that I wanted to ask. Do you want to have somebody else speak before we address these questions, or?
I would like to just know, do we have Kay Hao? Is she?
Yes, she's on. She doesn't have her video on.
That's okay, but maybe she could share, because I know that she's
Yeah.
not in the open.
Okay, she's about to speak, I think. Okay, there you go. She's on, she unmuted herself. There she goes. Got it. Oh, I think her audio is not good. We can't hear her. Can you hear her? No, the audio's not coming on. No.
Hold on.
No.
I don't know if there's another spot you can maybe. Oh, aloha. Can you hear us?
No. Okay. Looks like she keeps going on and off too, doesn't she? Yeah.
Kay Hao, feel free to chime in if you think you're getting a clear signal, because I would love for you to share as well. Until that point, perhaps then. Cecilia.
Aloha.
Oh, aloha. Yay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Is this better? Oh,
Yes.
aloha.
Thank you for joining
Oh.
us, Kaiulani.
Oh, it's a beautiful day in Hawaii, and made even more this morning. Lay Day today, happy Lay Day. My heart is overflowing. It's overflowing. It's so beautiful. Thank you, Lanialoha, for being for all the ancestors on all sides of this story. And for Hawaiians, we mo'olelo from the past, and we create new mo'olelo for the future. We're grounded always in our traditions of our ancestors and just of aloha. And everything that you have brought forth, it shows that we're already connected. All of us are already connected and have been for generations. And this initiative, I'm so grateful to the committee, the Memorial or Monument Committee, for bringing forth the light and opening the door for us to be able to walk in and dream of the day where our children, our grandchildren, but not only of Hawaiian people, but all people of Chicago.
Mahalo, Kay Hao. Cecilia, do you want to pose a question? And maybe Kay Hao, if that's something she can respond.
Yes, so one of the questions was, there's the, the counterpoint, right? That people who are basically Caucasian, who have lived there in Hawaii, believe that the overthrow was justified, saying Hawaii would have been taken over by Japan during World War II. And that may contribute to the anti-Hawley sentiment. So, but this argument here, or this point here, that the overthrow, if it hadn't occurred, Hawaii still would have been taken over by Japan during World War II. Please address that question.
Kay Hao, if you have this, I think it belongs to, I think that you could answer that.
Yeah. Can't hear. Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Such an interesting,
Okay,
it's
gotcha.
an interesting question, which I don't really see the relevance to in this issue, because how would we know, how do we know anything about what would have happened? I mean, the reality is, I'm sorry, I'm on the street. The reality is that our beloved princess was intended to be married to a prince of Japan, right? If that had come about, wow, yeah, what would have happened to Hawaii? Would we still have been a part of America? Would we have been our nation? Would we have, our alliance would have been very different, right? So I don't think it really has any benefit for us to argue over situations that are just hypothetical. We have the knowledge of where we were as a people, as Lani you so articulately expressed, and that the Queen, Liliuokalani, her had the loyalty of only Hawaiians, right? She was a loyalty of everyone who had come to this island, really, except for a small minority. And so I think that argument is a way to divert us away from the real issue. And the real issue is truth. What do we know to be the truth? And in this instance today, we know that we had a beloved queen, Liliuokalani, who endeavored to make sure that the people of Hawaii would continue to be able to preserve the culture and live strongly. And she didn't say only Hawaiians, it was for the people of Hawaii to move forward. And when she was removed so cruelly, and as the government of America has expressed over 20 years ago, illegally, what she did was not to become hateful, to become mean-spirited, to become unloving. In fact, she went to her connection with God to ask for forgiveness of these people and to extend her love and aloha and to wait patiently until the day would come when everything would be made right. And this what is being brought forth today is that beautiful moment. And because people with loving hearts in Chicago have opened them and said to us, maybe there's an opportunity for righting the wrong as people, one to each other. In our practice, you would call that ho'oponopono. Yeah, ho'oponopono, to make right. It's a spiritual practice, and it's a practice that has I'm sorry, somebody talking over here, a spiritual practice that has carried forth from generations before. So our queen, she had anticipated that the princess would be the one to be the heir apparent and that would take over the reign after her passing, right? And the way that she did that was with such love. She wrote a prayer, the Queen's Prayer. And she wrote it and she dedicated it to Kaiulani. And that prayer is a universal message, not just for Hawaiian people, but for all people. Today is not only historical correction or an issue of social justice, but is an act of real healing, of true ho'oponopono between all people. It is going to lift us all and acknowledge that we have always been connected. Chicago and Hawaii and all the millions of people who traverse through both have always been connected. And what better message is there to send to the young people today who are striving to find a role model who they can emulate, who stands in purity and of grace and elegance and intelligence, and most importantly, aloha.
I think, did we just lose her?
We did, yeah, we did.
Okay. Oh, here she's possibly
Coming back.
We see you, Kehal.
Sorry, but
No,
I'm just-
Kalamai, the challenge is I'm in a space that's like a vortex. And so it goes in and out. So anyway, I just wanted to thank you all for really being the practitioners of aloha in this practice today. And no matter where it goes from now, the fact is you are touching hearts there all the way to Hawaii, all the way around the world. And that's the healing work that we need to do together. I know personally, Kaiulani would be the most incredible international representative. And there can be no doubt about that. She will help to bring people together, not to divide them. And her mana is powerful, and your mana is powerful. And I just ask Keiko to bless everyone. Bless all of you and all of the decision makers and the leaders and the community who reside in the area and in the city. Thank you so much from the deepest space in our heart, from Hawaii, to honor us this day. We thank you. Love you.
love you too. Mahalo ke hau. Cecilia.
Yes.
I'm glad she was here to share about that. It's not so much just the bottom line answer, but to be able to understand the context. Was there another question?
Yeah, there's so there was one here. There was one here that said, sadly, the Hawaiian community has been blamed for an attempt to pull down the statue at McKinley Park last year. Can you address this?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
I hope that if you, whoever asked that question, that you were here to see the entire presentation, or at least most of it, that what I was trying to also share is how we malama every single step of the way of this path, that we take great care in the decisions and everything we made, every action that we took to get to this point. Our event was October 16th on the Princess' birthday, and it is not the only event we have ever made certain that we conduct on that day, and it's to resonate with her on a date that's that significant. I understand that there was a meeting that had taken place, and the discussion was not, I don't think, just focused on McKinley. I could be wrong about that, but I just don't think he merits that kind of attention. So I'm going to think that he wasn't really the focus, but rather all the protesting and all the destruction and the damage that was taking place with so many other statues coming down, and that the words that placed that blame on Native Hawaiians came from a reporter who did not do any due diligence as a journalist. If he had, he should have found his way to me. I'm not hiding, but there is no image, no picture, no proof that Native Hawaiians at least grouped. Maybe there might have been one, who knows, in the wash of it, but we did not move forward as a community to make an act like that would have only disrespected Princess Kaiulani. I was actually notified by 3 different legs of the Native American community that took place the next month, but it wasn't until after the 1st of December, or definitely December, that actually what I heard, it was the Aloha centers. It was not Native Hawaiians. I heard that it was our organization, Aloha Center Chicago, that was behind that chaining. It would have been nice to have him come aboard. I would like to question that gentleman, because it's that kind of action that's really, we got to clarify. This is not, I don't have time for this to do damage control, but when they're out there doing that, and if it's coming through the questions right here, we had nothing to do with that, nor would we
No.
ever. And all you have to do is send me a little email. That's all that guy ever had to do. He cannot say to me that he did not use Facebook to try, make an effort. There was a Facebook page that was out there that was created just days before the 16th. This was not, there was no strategic plan, you know, that went beyond the idea that we were just going to meet and just educate people. And I was going to tell the story. I didn't have device. I didn't have computer. I didn't have pala. It was just me sharing, and people came for that. And that's all I'd like to say about that.
I would like to say something.
Hi.
If I can.
Hi.
I think that what is important to ask when those issues arise is not to say, yes, I did, or I didn't do it, because it's just one person's word against another person's word. The question to ask is why? Why does a person feel a need to express themselves in a way that? Why? And how is this effort to heal that? What can we all do together to honor that and together to resolve whoever that person is? Maybe even more so if it's not a Hawaiian person. Why does a person have so much anger? Why do they feel that desecrating anyone's monument in a violent act is an act like this? Why do they do that? And who is responsible for helping to heal that? And the answer is all of us. All of us. We pray for that person. We pray for that person who did that.
That was very good. Thank you. I think she got kicked off again.
Yeah.
And there was a comment there. You saw that word.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that I say, you know, this everything we ask is from the space of Aloha Queen. Everything the space of Aloha. She could bring forth of wrongs that were committed, and she did it in a loving way, a kind way, a truthful way. So we do the same thing back when these issues like this are raised. What is our loving response to that? And let's go find that person together.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Find that
That's a
person
very,
and
that's a very excellent point. Very excellent point. Are there any more questions there? There was a question, actually, I posted it from the Q&A, and it's on the chat right now. And it was a question about, what was it? I copied it from the Q&A. It says, since the Bayonet Constitution, citizens and descendants have been struggling with an ongoing attack on our Lahue, since I'm not Hawaiian, I'm mispronouncing that, creating a victim mentality and a constant frustration. Let's change the narrative. So what do you think about that?
Maybe McKinley has to come down. So now it's like they're pitting everybody against each other.
We
right?
need to mute there she is. She muted.
Well, I wasn't sure she was trying to respond, but if she,
Okay.
and I know you were reading, but I was going in and out between her.
So yeah, so the comment basically is that the political economic narrative that is associated with the statue of Kaiulani versus Kalukua is one of victimization. So how do you change that narrative? Anybody want to answer that?
Um,
Go ahead.
Okay,
to
Helen.
read
Okay.
with them.
The-
Yeah. And written words. And use the essence of
She's not coming on right.
love. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell them I better listen.
Well, I think that part of what we're doing right now is beginning to change the dialogue right here, just by sticking with historical facts, and making sure that we recognize what the true actions were. As Kaiulani had stated, the most important thing that I wanted to make sure was contained in this presentation were the actual facts. And there are a couple of people on board here that I had even shared that there was extra time spent to make sure that we could answer those questions. I think that this would be available, that people can go back. But if we focus on those actions, then it already kind of has us pushing away those other things that are not a part of these acts. And it's the acts of McKinley that we're trying to move forward with. I wish I had a little bit more of the insight knowledge of the bayonet. But this idea of trying to change that dialogue has been over 100 years, over 150 years now. And I think that it's going to take great courage for us, like we are doing right now, to open the doors, create ideas, and be able to come up with how we can change the dialogue. One is change his vision, change his existence. That's one idea. Another is, if we can't do that, then we take a step to at least educate the people and get the truth out. The dialogue should always stem from the truth. So then add them to the audio tour, make sure that the plaque is reading appropriately, and make sure that there's truth. And that somewhere on there, that he really is responsible for the fact that Princess Kaiulani was not able to take her place and rule the Hawaiian nation as she rightfully, in her inherent right, was supposed to be taking position for. So, and there's still, I think, a lingering other couple of questions that could have our dialogue go yet in another direction. I think for me, I feel safe to just allow myself to stay focused. And the reason why I also say that, though, is because, especially with other people out there, we are not alone. That I always know that I can look to the guidance of our kupuna and our difference, who are doing all the healing and all the work, that it doesn't have to lay on me. I do not contain all the critical knowledge, but I do my best to learn and get it right. So when asked, at least I can tell Kaiulani's story. And this is my story of her through my family, who were a part of how we got here today. I see that Kehao is coming in and out, but certainly if Hana, if you wanted to add to that, or Auntie Sissy, if you wanted to add to that.
Can I add to that, Lonnie?
Yes, absolutely.
And it really based on the comment that somebody put in the chat, and that is, the citizens of Chicago hopefully can be educated that honoring the lands of their Native Americans includes the people of Native Hawaii. I think that's a very powerful statement there. But as somebody who is not Hawaiian, and I'm here because you know me, because I'm Pacific Islander, and I think even though Hawaii, is a whole separate entity, right? We're all Pacific Islanders, and I think one of the one of the things that have always bothered me as a Pacific Islander is that America has a huge presence in the Pacific, right?
Yeah.
And yet many people don't know about it. Many people don't know about, you know, what's going on, what happened in the Marshall Islands, for example, with the nuclear testing. And so I'd be perfectly happy if there is that statue, because at least there's that representation of Pacific Islanders here in the United States who contribute to the United States in terms of basically giving up their land to be used as a nuclear testing site. And a majority of the people joined the military, and yet many people just, you know, I think people just don't think of us, you know, we don't belong anywhere, right? And so, I guess I want to add to that comment, you know, about when you think about the indigenous people of the United States, it's really Native Hawaiians, the indigenous people of the United States, but also what about the indigenous people of the territories that have always, you know, for a long time have been affiliated with the United States. And the United States certainly, especially today, is not willing to give up on those lands, because in this battle with China, we are very important to the United States. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Sorry, that's just my piece. So wanted to add to that.
Mahalo that. I think you're seeing those questions more clearly than I am able to. I really just figured out how to view some of the chat, but it's so, I cannot read it at the moment. So excuse me for not being able to tie in a little bit of what other comments are looking like. Yeah. You look like you're seeing another question. Are you muted?
I'm muted. Hannah, did you see that question from Melissa in the Q&A? You're not seeing that?
Ooh, somebody read that one.
So in the Q&A, okay, so it says here, stick with historical facts, don't get bogged down trying to change people's minds about McKinley, Pearl Harbor, etc. Educate, 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 focus in aloha one another, stress that just because you live in a continent, you stopped being Hawaiian. I don't know what that means.
Probably haven't stopped.
Haven't stopped, that's what I'm thinking. So yeah. So that was a comment. Another question was, well, it's not really a question, but it's a comment. U.S. foreign policies modeled after McKinley, a statue with a sad story to proud American citizens will not be as effective at reversing that policy. Presenting Hawaii as a developed nation would change the narrative more effectively. So that is the same question. That's from the person who raised the question about the bayonet constitution. So,
But we're talking about the narrative of Princess Kaiulani. And I get it, Auntie Melissa, mahalo for sharing to stay focused. But a lot of these questions, I'm trying to make the connection to Chicago, and that the answer that I called, the call that I answered to was pertaining to our story between McKinley and Kaiulani, to discuss further all these discussions that have been out there already for decade after decade after decade. That's an ongoing thing that requires a very different group of panelists, all of which have walked that part of this ongoing history. I am talking about very specific actions I have outlined in this presentation that was taken by McKinley, bottom line. So some of this that I'm hearing, we're just talking about bringing Kaiulani here to us to offer for people like Auntie Sissy's family, her grandkids, and the mo'omo'opunas, to be able to come, and Hana to be able to share your powerful words in an open space. It is a wahi pana that is open for us. It is the platform missing. If we want to talk about that further, let's erect Kaiulani, and let's provide for all of us Chicago Midwest the missing platform in which we can address that. And I promise you, like Keha was saying, that's just another area in which we can heal. That is not my dialogue. That is not my kuleana. I just want to share. When I, as a Native Hawaiian delegate, go home for the Association of Hawaiian Civic Club conventions, there are just so many resolutions that are all chipping away at these issues that have been plaguing us for centuries, for generations. But my little piece, all that I can do when I go home, is to represent us Native Hawaiians up here. So when we move forward on these questions, I would like for everyone to really focus on what that impact would be for us here. The dialogue from that is the new stories. That's where it's going to come from. But I think we need just a little bit more courage to just first things first. Here's the truth. Now, what actions can we take? Do we transform McKinley Statue into Kaiulani? That is just an awesome message sent, that somebody in this city has the courage to sort of change that dialogue, which is so not worthy. Somebody tell me why we keep him. It's not, the question is not the princess. She never was. The question is why McKinley? I never even saw evidence in 1905 of why him. If all they were doing is getting rid of an eyesore of Columbus, well, you replaced him with another eyesore. How did that solve anything? So for me, I am just looking at what brought us here today. All those other questions are really good, especially where it concerns the bayonet, but that's not what this discussion is about. And it is super easy not to go into these other areas because they're all connected. I get it. But with all that's impacted Native Hawaiians, we're talking about the ones that are still living. And my concern is nobody remembers the living. Everyone's focused on the buried history. It's not even the right history. I'm just talking about McKinley. Somebody tell me, anybody tell me why it is so important to continue to praise that man. And I've offered you many reasons why you may praise Princess Kaiulani. I don't have the answer to everything. Auntie Sissy is speaking. Are you muted, Auntie?
Okay. Talking about McKinley, why is it McKinley have a high school in Oahu?
Interesting, you mentioned the McKinley on Oahu. So McKinley High School was named after him, of course, and uncanny enough, I think it was 2 days before the actual deadline for submission of applications for this program in Chicago, McKinley Statue was being canvassed and also placed in question. They're addressing the hardcore reasons, all the questions that I'm hearing, just the last couple ones, Auntie Cecilia. Really, that's what those guys are attacking, because that's because of the aina in which he stands. He's in Hawaii. This one is here in Chicago. But they had challenged I think it was the Hawaii Teachers Union. And the key lobbyist is a special education teacher from McKinley, who also believes in the fact that they need to change that dialogue for their own students. Now, some of those images that I shared in my presentation on October 16th in 2005, when we gathered in Lincoln Square, there were two graduates of McKinley in that room. And I think that if they were I haven't heard anyone from McKinley looking back when Obama stripped the mountain name from McKinley's name and returned it rightfully. So I haven't heard that. No, I'm just, it's really hard to discuss that and keep it clear, but in Honolulu, we are side by side expressing the same thing. We have two different filters. One pertains to our people here, and they're taking care of that part. Yeah. So yeah, it was uncanny that did you catch that? Did Hawaii call you and tell you about that? It was out there. So yeah, I mean, Chicago feel really good about the fact that, hey, you're not alone. And I suspect that they would be so supportive at the idea that somebody in Chicago would be willing to discuss this. I don't know, my question to the city is, would Chicago Park District be willing to take this discussion further to the point that we can maybe come up with one or two ideas that could be viable, and then to ascertain the information we need to determine what those next steps would be? Would the city be willing to support this Native Hawaiian community? Would the mayor be willing to listen and sit down? I certainly would also be willing to go and make extra trips and work with aldermen, the aldermen. There isn't a place that I haven't lived in this whole area that I have not been in close contact with my aldermen wards. They play a great role to me in representing our community. But together, would they be able to? Could this be the next thing really huge for the Indigenous people? First, the Indigenous people's resolution, that we can now celebrate that. Could this be another effort that the city would support? Would there be aldermen out there willing to take point? I can think of 3 right off the top of my head who have already exhibited support for the Indigenous people openly, on record. This is really good to know. So maybe, yeah. So when Hawaii looks at us, and they are looking at us, but seeing how that we are moving forward and literally trying to learn, open the gateway and learn both sides of the coin, two-way road. I think that they could feel good about that. That we're also trying to do our share here. Yeah, Hannah? Cecilia?
Yeah, I'm just here to listen mostly and learn every day new things. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's actually a really great note to end this on today, is that we're asking this from the city park district. Are they willing to have this conversation? Does anyone have
Cecilia,
any closing?
Yeah, Cecilia, I thought if you want to just take a quick glance over the last comments again, it's a little blurred on my side. Outside of that, perhaps I'll just close.
Well, so there is one comment in the Q&A about if you're saying to take the McKinley statue down, I will support you. And this person said, I signed the petition to take down the one in Honolulu. So that one was done, okay. And then there was a comment, the statue in Honolulu holds the Treaty of Annexation, would love to recast it as a kingdom patriot. or an ali'i? What is an ali'i? That's one I don't know about. So I would love to recast the statue as a ali'i or kingdom patriot. That was a comment there. That was a final comment. Wait a minute,
Nice.
is there another comment? I think that's the last comment.
Okay. Nice. These are great. And I promise everyone that I will go back and take time, just have to grab my other glasses, and make sure that to the best of my recollection, and I will review this entire recorded session to make sure that there are answers out there. If I have to email them out to you, I'm quite happy to do that. And I think my email is available on the Eventbrite. So if questions come forward, I think all of these are really important. I would like to capture them and discuss it further. I know for me, on behalf of the KLE Victoria Kaiulani Hawaiian Civic Club, our next step may very well be looking towards beginning a podcast so that we can broaden an ongoing discussion between Hawaii and Chicago with regard to the McKinley Statue, and then also with Chicago and the Native Hawaiians here in the Chicago-Midwest area. Because I don't think that this can end in just a couple sessions. This is going to take some time, and we'll need to malama the new information coming in. So a big, huge mahalo to everyone. This went way longer than I really meant for it to be, but it was really good content and a good exchange. I'll further that. Holomua, everybody. Stand firm in the values and traditions of Hawaii as we strive for excellence, moving only in a forward motion. This is the goal. I wish that for everybody. Yes, Auntie?
Well, so there's a question here. Will the educational part, the Zoom educational part, I guess I'm thinking the lecture that you presented, would that be shareable?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we want that. I think it's important to do that. Yes.
Okay. All right.
Lanialoha. My name is Lanialoha. I never really said that. But Lanialoha808@gmail. If you want, just hit me up. And I'm also out there on the Facebook. And you know what, you guys, if you have questions out there, all you have to do is ask. Mahalo, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye. See you all,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye-bye.